I never expected a steel pole in my backyard to trigger a federal investigation, a full-scale neighborhood meltdown, and an FBI visit to my neighbor's house. But that's exactly what happened after I installed a small radio communications tower behind my garage. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't tall enough to be dangerous. It wasn't some top-secret government experiment. It was literally just a hobby project so I could talk to other ham radio nerds and listen to weather updates during storm season. I even checked all the zoning requirements, filed the proper permits, and got everything approved. Unfortunately, I made one fatal mistake. I didn't ask Karen for permission. The drama began the morning the contractors arrived with the crate. Karen spotted them before I did. I heard her signature bark. That clipped, self-important voice that always sounded like she was filing a complaint with reality. She marched over from her perfectly trimmed lawn, arms swinging like she was clearing invisible peasants out of her path. She didn't even look at me first. She went straight to the workers, blocking their way as if she could stop construction by physically embodying disapproval. "What are you installing?" she demanded, glaring at the crate like it was a bomb. The contractor glanced at me. I sighed. "A communications tower. For radio." Karen's eyes widened. "Radio? Like spying?" I could almost see the conspiracy theory forming behind her pupils. "Just a hobby," I said, trying not to sound annoyed. "Perfectly legal. Approved by the city." She ignored every word except legal and twisted it into an accusation. "So you admit you needed special approval?" "Only suspicious things need approval." I had to give her credit. In her brain, paranoid logic always connected seamlessly. She walked off after delivering a warning glare, like she was mentally drafting the email that would ruin my life. The tower went up within a week. It was maybe 25 feet tall, barely taller than my house's roofline, with a slim antenna mast at the top. From the street you could barely see it. But Karen acted like a missile silo had risen in suburbia. The morning after it was completed, she was already waiting in my driveway, wearing her HOA badge. She treats that badge like a police shield even though she can't legally do anything except complain. "We have rules about structures," she announced. "Rules keep communities safe and free from hazards." She wiggled her fingers at the tower like it was radiating death rays. I told her, calmly, that the city approved it and the HOA had no jurisdiction over my lot because my section of the neighborhood didn't join the HOA. She blinked twice, stunned, as if the concept of someone existing outside her authority was a glitch in the universe. She tried a different angle. "What about the children? They're developing brains? Radiation from these antennas can melt small skulls." I asked her to name a study showing any such skull-melting effects. She sputtered like a lawnmower starting up before storming off again, probably to deepen her Google research. That evening I heard voices outside. Karen had gathered 3 other HOA board members and was pointing at my tower with the intensity of someone identifying a murder weapon. They debated wildly inaccurate science while accusing me of cooperating with foreign intelligence agencies. I opened my window. "Maybe you should ask me questions instead of guessing?" That suggestion only fueled them further. "If you have nothing to hide, why are you hiding?" one of them shouted. The logic was staggering. I tried being friendly once more. "If any of you would like, I can show you exactly how it works." "Safe. Boring." They refused. Conspiracies thrive in confusion. Facts are inconvenient. The next morning, Karen escalated. A giant professionally printed sign appeared at the end of her driveway. "Protect our neighborhood. Stop secret 5G towers." The sign featured a clip-art brain melting like a candle next to an antenna. She also created a Facebook group, which my coworker discovered and gleefully sent to me. The group description accused me of installing a government surveillance unit disguised as a ham radio mast. It also claimed I was recording private conversations through microwave. I didn't even know what that meant. Within days, half the neighborhood was whispering and staring at my house. Parents ushered kids away when I walked outside like I was a walking tumor. Delivery drivers asked if it was safe to stand near the garage. One guy asked if I was building an EMP device. I made the mistake of laughing, and he practically ran back to his truck. But things truly spiraled the day Karen called the police. 2 officers knocked politely and asked about the tower. They already knew it was fine, but they had to respond to a concerning report. They left chuckling after I showed them the permit and basic safety spec. You'd think that would end it. You'd be wrong. Karen didn't accept defeat. She upgraded her conspiracy theory. Now it wasn't just dangerous. It was illegal espionage. She filed noise complaints even though the tower was silent. She accused me of electromagnetic harassment. She claimed I was disrupting her Wi-Fi by stealing the signal waves. Once again, I offered a demonstration. Once again, she declined. She preferred horror stories of invisible threats over any boring truth. The final straw arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. I heard heavy boots on gravel and looked out the window expecting the mailman. Instead, 2 dark unmarked SUVs rolled to a smooth stop in front of Karen's house. The doors swung open in perfect synchronization. 4 men stepped out wearing jackets with bright letters on the back. FBI. For a second I assumed Karen had escalated things to a federal level and they were here to confiscate my tower. My stomach dropped. I had followed every regulation but suddenly felt guilty anyway. But then I noticed something strange. The agents weren't walking toward me. They marched straight to Karen's front door. They didn't knock. They pounded. Loud. Commanding. Karen opened, her voice shrill enough to hear through closed windows. Something about that tower man. But then an agent held up a folder. Her face changed instantly, like someone pressed pause on her righteousness. They stepped inside. The door slammed shut. I stood frozen in my kitchen. What could Karen possibly have done to attract the FBI? Did they think she was harassing me? Was it the Facebook propaganda? The illegal signage? The unauthorized gathering to overthrow antennas? Minutes crawled by. Then the shouting started. Not Karen's shouting. Deeper voices, authoritative, punctuated by the sound of footsteps and the unmistakable tone of someone being read their rights. For the first time in weeks, I was grateful for that tower. It wasn't the communication device Karen feared, but it definitely brought a message. I didn't know what to do while the FBI was inside Karen's house. Standing by the window felt creepy, but sitting down felt irresponsible, like I might miss something important. I compromised by pretending to clean the kitchen while absolutely spying through the blinds every 30 seconds. Eventually, the door flew open and 2 agents escorted Karen outside. Her arms were stiff, hands held awkwardly behind her back, though she wasn't cuffed. Yet, she looked less like a tyrant queen and more like a soggy cat being carried out of a bathtub. She spotted me watching from my porch and shouted, "He's the one! He has the tower! It's a weapon!" The agents didn't even glance at me. They put her into the SUV and drove off like a coordinated machine. The neighborhood erupted. People walked outside one by one, peeking from doorways, pretending to check mail that hadn't arrived. A flock of gossip hens formed on the sidewalk, wildly gesturing in front of Karen's lawn sign. Apparently she had managed to turn half the street into members of her personal cult, but just as quickly as they'd rallied, they scattered now that she was under federal scrutiny. I stepped outside cautiously. One of the agents from the second SUV was speaking with an older guy across the street. When he finished, he turned and walked straight to me. My heart climbed into my throat. Even though I had done nothing wrong, there's something about a federal badge that turns every innocent person into a sweaty liar in their own mind. "You the homeowner with the tower?" the agent asked. His voice was neutral. I nodded. He introduced himself as Special Agent Reed. "We'd like to ask you a few questions. This is strictly routine." I hoped routine meant less than 10 minutes, and no handcuffs. He asked me how long the tower had been installed, whether I had permits, what equipment I used, and if I had any contact with foreign group. I explained everything calmly, though the foreign group's part caught me off guard. My only international communication was thanking a guy in Canada for selling me a spare antenna piece on eBay. Not exactly treason. When I finished, he gave a tiny nod. That matches what we have. Then he looked at the tower. One more thing. Have you noticed anything unusual with your signal? That question landed weird. The agents hadn't come to shut me down. They didn't care about my harmless radio hobby. They were here for something else. I asked what was going on. Reed didn't reveal much, but he gave me enough to ignite my curiosity. We received a credible tip involving electronic interference originating from this block. We traced some suspicious communication attempts to somewhere in this immediate area. We needed to make sure no unauthorized equipment was installed. Suspicious communication. Unauthorized equipment. My mind spun. Was someone actually spying? Did Karen accidentally report a real criminal? I opened my mouth to speculate, but Reed raised a hand. I'm not at liberty to discuss the target of our interest. Thank you for your time. The agents left as swiftly as they arrived. The silence afterward felt heavy, like the calm before a far nastier storm. I stood in the yard staring at Karen's sign. Stop Secret 5G Towers. Was this her attempt at activism, or a cover for something more personal? She seemed like the type to hoard secret. She always acted like my harmless metal pole threatened some hidden agenda of hers. I didn't have to wait long for answers. That evening, a police cruiser returned with Karen in the back seat, looking like she'd aged 20 years during whatever the FBI had told her. She wasn't arrested. But she was furious. She stomped straight to my driveway as soon as she was released, ignoring the officer's warning to calm down. What did you tell them? She demanded. Why are they investigating me instead of you? I told her truthfully that they asked routine questions. She didn't buy a word. You think you're clever. You think you can fool everyone with your metal tower and smug attitude. But I know what you're doing. You're spying on us. She jabbed her finger at my chest. I'm not going down for your crimes. I didn't bother responding. Rational discussion wasn't possible with someone constructing a whole courtroom drama inside her imagination. She shoved a stapled packet into my hands before retreating. It was a cease and desist letter she had written herself. It featured legal phrases she clearly Googled but used incorrectly. It threatened fines from an HOA I didn't belong to, plus something about neural invasion. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The next escalation came at midnight. I woke to a metallic clanking sound and peeked outside. There was Karen, wearing gardening gloves and head-to-toe black like a raccoon burglar, swinging a bolt cutter at the base of my tower. Sparks shot into the grass. She let out a primal grunt like she was fighting a dragon instead of aluminum tubing. I threw on shoes and rushed outside. Karen! Stop! She whirled around holding the cutter like a sword. Get back. This thing is controlling people. I'm saving the neighborhood. I kept my distance, hands raised. You're damaging my property. You could get hurt. The ground here is electrified, isn't it? She said that like it proved her point. Before I could reply, the lights from 2 more houses flicked on. A neighbor yelled for someone to call the police. Karen tried again, swinging the bolt cutter wildly. It bounced harmlessly off the metal. She seemed disappointed she hadn't triggered an explosion or revealed hidden alien circuitry. Instead, the only thing she triggered was the sprinkler system when she backed into a motion sensor. Water blasted her full force. She slipped and fell, dropping the cutter. A burst of laughter from somewhere in the dark preceded the arrival of flashing red and blue lights. The police recognized her immediately. This time she didn't shriek accusations at me. She just stared at the tower with haunted eyes, like it had personally betrayed her. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I hesitated. A petty part of me wanted the satisfaction, but another part almost pitted her spiral into paranoia. I declined, but warned that next time I wouldn't be so forgiving. Karen didn't thank me. Instead, she hissed, "They're watching. They're listening. You're not who you pretend to be. The officer gently guided her home before she could escalate further. The neighborhood erupted in rumors by morning. Some people thought Karen was right and I was secretly dangerous. Others believed the FBI was investigating her because she was the dangerous one. And some thought we were both doing espionage against each other like a suburb version of Cold War spies. The misinformation mutated faster than a virus. One neighbor, Mark, knocked on my door during lunch. He was the kind of guy who loved disaster movies and conspiracy podcasts. He leaned closer and whispered, "Did you know Karen has a whole radio setup in her basement?" My eyebrows rose. That didn't sound like something she'd admit. Mark grinned like he had just revealed state secret. I heard from Janet, who heard from someone who saw boxes labeled signal boosters, delivered last month. That detail lodged itself in my mind like a thorn. The FBI said suspicious communication originated from this block. And Karen suddenly had equipment she didn't admit to. Had she accused me of the very thing she was doing? That was a classic Karen move. Late that night, as I sat by my radio checking frequencies, something odd happened. A faint, encrypted digital signal burst onto the band. Not local chatter. Not weather updates. A short stream of coded pulses, then silence. I logged the frequency and timestamp. Moments later, more pulses. Then quiet again. My hair prickled. The signal was coming from close by. Very close. The tower wasn't the only thing transmitting around here. Karen wasn't just paranoid. She was hiding something. I barely slept after detecting that encrypted burst. My mind wouldn't stop racing. If the signal came from Karen's house, then every accusation she made about me might have been a projection. The tower wasn't the threat she imagined. She was. I needed proof before doing anything reckless, but it was impossible not to speculate. Why would a bored suburban tyrant have mysterious radio gear hidden in her basement? What did she think she was transmitting? Or worse, who was she actually transmitting to? The next day, I kept a close eye on Karen's place while pretending to go about my normal routine. She didn't emerge all morning. Her windows were covered, blinds drawn tight like a bunker. That wasn't unusual for someone convinced radiation beams were melting the neighborhood, but after last night's signal, it felt more purposeful. Around noon, a delivery van stopped in front of her house. The driver unloaded a suspiciously heavy-looking crate. Karen cracked the door exactly 3 inches, signed without a word, and yanked it inside with surprising strength. I wanted to know what was in that box, but I wasn't going to snoop like a cartoon detective creeping through shrubs. I needed a more subtle approach. So I did the only reasonable thing. I turned to technology. I set up a radio directional antenna and triangulated the signal origin whenever the encrypted bursts returned. Each time, the arrow pointed directly at her house. The transmissions came in short, irregular patterns like someone entering commands, sending data, then pausing. Most concerning of all, the transmissions correlated perfectly with FBI activity. When agents were in the area, the signal went silent. When they left, it resumed. Karen wasn't avoiding detection because of paranoia. She was avoiding detection because she understood exactly how to stay invisible. That night, my curiosity turned into resolve. I had 2 options. Alert the FBI and hope they listened to a bored ham radio hobbyist, or gather undeniable evidence so they couldn't ignore me. I opted for the long game. It was the only game I ever played well. The opportunity came sooner than expected. I was outside adjusting a weatherproof casing on my equipment when I heard Karen behind me. She must have snuck over like a particularly angry house cat. She stood there, frazzled hair, sunken eyes, wrapped in a faded bathrobe. The once unstoppable commander of the HOA now looked like someone who had been screaming into a void long enough for it to start screaming back. "They're watching me," she whispered. Not with her usual dramatic rage but with raw fear. Real fear. I paused, surprised. Karen had always yelled about threats like they were beneath her, something she had dominion over. But in that moment, she wasn't accusing me. She was confessing something to herself. "Who is watching you?" I asked softly. Her hands shook as she clutched her robe closed. "The government. The neighbors. You. Everyone." She said it like reading from a script that had been drilled into her brain. I tried a different tactic. "Why were the FBI here yesterday?" For a moment, her eyes darted like she was searching for the safest lie. Then she whispered, low and trembling, "Because they know. They found me out. It's already too late." She didn't elaborate. Instead, she turned and hurried away, disappearing back into her self-made fortress. I stood frozen, processing her words. They didn't sound like entitled threats. They sounded like guilt. Karen wasn't the villain of this story. She was one of its casualties. Right after sunset, a new signal hit the band. Stronger this time. Longer burst durations. The encryption sounded more complex, more deliberate. This wasn't someone fumbling with tech. This was someone sending information with precision. Sweat prickled my hairline. Whatever Karen was involved in wasn't amateur. I logged everything. Frequency, packet length, pulse intervals. It formed a recognizable pattern, one used by certain covert communication devices. I had stumbled into something real, something dangerous, something way beyond Karen's obsessive tower crusade. Then, something unexpected. The tower detected a reply. A faint incoming signal from far outside city limit. Karen wasn't just sending messages. She was receiving them. At that point, caution was no longer optional. It was survival. I decided to shut down my radio for the night to avoid getting caught in crossfire. But before I could flip the power, the tower's speakers crackled with static. A single distorted voice cut through for a fraction of a second. "We know you're listening." The line went dead. I froze. My hands shook uncontrollably. My radio gear was entirely passive at that moment. The only way anyone could have known was if someone had detected the tower's monitoring function. That wasn't casual spying. That required specialized hardware. Hardware Karen must have had. She had noticed me noticing. The next morning, I pretended nothing had changed. I mowed my lawn, chatted with a neighbor, walked to the mailbox. Meanwhile, my eyes continuously tracked across to Karen's house. I spotted movement behind the blinds. Someone was watching back. I realized then the FBI hadn't been looking for someone using a ham setup. They were searching for someone who knew how to hide illegal signals using everyday equipment. Karen didn't fear imaginary government monitoring. She feared the very real one closing in on her. By afternoon, I decided I needed more direct intelligence. I went to my laptop, searched city permit filings, and looked up Karen's house. Nothing unusual in the public record. But I found something odd. The basement had an addition built last year. It was approved under a vague description referencing storage improvements. Yet the contractors listed were not local. They were a specialty firm known for installing secure infrastructure. Karen had invested serious money in whatever operation she was running, and she had done it under everyone's noses, all while publicly screaming about my harmless tower. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Karen's panic wasn't just paranoia. It was cover. Every accusation against me had been a deflection. Every dramatic performance a smokescreen. I grabbed my encrypted data logs and printed them. I also recorded the triangulation results with timestamps and compiled them into a neat folder. I didn't need to play secret surveillance analyst. I just needed to show the FBI what they had missed. Karen wasn't just the neighborhood menace. She was the mole. That evening, I called the number Agent Reed gave me and asked if he could stop by again. He sounded wary, but agreed. When the SUV arrived, Reed stepped out looking tired. I handed him the folder. He scanned the first page and stopped breathing for a moment. He flipped to the second, third. He took a slow, deep breath. "This is significant evidence," he said. "Where did you obtain this?" I pointed at my tower. "It's designed for long-range reception. I stumbled on the signals by accident. At first I thought they were random noise. but the origin matched Karen's house every time. Reed looked at me with an expression that said both gratitude and concern. You need to stay out of sight tonight. And stay off the radio. You are not the target here. He climbed back into the SUV and sped away. I expected a tactical raid at dawn. Instead, dusk was barely cooling the sidewalks when the FBI vans returned. Not 2. 5. They formed a blockade around the block. Agents spread out silently like shadows with badges. Something about their urgency told me Karen wasn't the only one being watched anymore. I heard the battering ram before I saw it. Karen's door crashed inward. Agents poured inside. Screaming followed. Furniture overturned. Orders barked. Lights flashed across windows. This wasn't a quiet arrest. It was a takedown. For the second time, Karen was dragged outside. But this wasn't fear anymore. It was a fury so primal it looked like possession. You don't understand, she shrieked. He's the one. He's the one using my signal. She pointed directly at me. Every agent turned. And I realized something horrifying. All the data I gathered, all the signals detected, all the transmissions tracked, they weren't coming from Karen's house. They were coming from mine. For a moment, everything stopped moving. The agents froze like a movie paused at the worst possible frame. Karen stood panting, wild-eyed, convinced she had finally forced the spotlight in the correct direction. And me? I felt my stomach drop through the concrete. Because while every bone in my body screamed that Karen was wrong, the evidence I had collected didn't agree. My tower had been the receiver. But what if it wasn't only receiving? What if something was transmitting from my home without my knowledge? Agent Reed broke the silence first, barking orders into his radio. Half the team peeled away from Karen's lawn and surged toward my property. Boots pounded on pavement. Flashlights clicked on. Hands hovered near holsters. In seconds, my quiet driveway transformed into a crime scene perimeter. Reed approached me directly, expression unreadable. We need to inspect your equipment. Now. I wanted to argue, explain, protest the absurdity. But my voice came out brittle and useless. Whatever you need. His team swept inside. I followed, adrenaline turning my nerves electric. They combed through every corner of my setup with surgical precision. Tools were taken apart. Wires were traced. My computer was unplugged and placed in an evidence bag. The longer they searched, the farther away the truth felt. I kept replaying last night's message in my head. We know you're listening. At the time, I assumed they were responding to the tower's passive reception. But what if they meant something transmitting? Something I never installed? The agents clustered around a cabinet beside the tower's control unit. Reed beckoned me over. Did you place this here? I looked closely. A small black device, wired directly into my transmitter line, almost invisible against the metal frame. Definitely nothing I owned. No. I breathed. I've never seen that. Reed nodded. It has its own power supply. Very low signature. Someone piggybacked on your system, using your antenna as cover. My pulse hammered. Karen had accused me of invisible control signals, and now the FBI had discovered a literal hidden transmitter in my property. This story was about to eat me alive. Reed's team removed the device carefully, snapping photos before sealing it in evidence packaging. The moment they disconnected it, my receiver went silent. No more encrypted pulses. No interference. No phantom replies. It was like someone had flipped a switch on a spy game. Reed faced me again, voice lower. Whoever did this is skilled. They needed physical access, time, and knowledge of how to hide in plain sight. Karen had been sneaking onto my property. I'd caught her once with bolt cutters. Who else had she dragged into this? Reed signaled his men and stepped outside. Meanwhile, outside, Karen was screaming accusations at every agent in range. You're protecting him. He's the one. He's the one sending codes. Her voice cracked between fury and despair. The moment she spotted Reed carrying the seized device, she threatened to collapse. See? I told you. She crowed it like a victory chant, oblivious to the fact that the proof could easily implicate her as well. As agents escorted her into a van, Karen twisted to lock eyes with me. "You're not the hero here, Tower Man. They're coming for you next." The door slammed. She was gone. And yet, unease burrowed into me. Because as much as I wanted to dismiss her rant, she had unknowingly told the truth about something real. Someone had framed me. Someone had crawled under the radar and used my tower as their puppet. I couldn't tell whether Karen was unlucky, delusional, or guilty. But someone else was definitely involved. With Karen detained, the neighborhood fell into a stunned quiet. I sat with Reed at my kitchen table as he reviewed preliminary findings. He wasn't interrogating me anymore. He was brainstorming with me. Whoever installed that device was sophisticated enough to mask digital fingerprint. Could Karen have done that? She barely understood how Wi-Fi worked. But she had resources. A secret basement, mysterious shipments, and an obsession with surveillance themes. Reed considered everything. "We'll have to analyze her equipment next. Your data logs helped confirm this isn't random. Someone is communicating covertly from this neighborhood." He paused. "We need to assume this operation isn't over." When the agents finally left, leaving a temporary monitoring device in place, the silence inside my house felt violent. I walked through rooms that suddenly felt vulnerable, wondering where else someone had been. How long had that device been running? What information had been sent? And who exactly was receiving it? The thought made me check every door and window lock twice. The next day, reporters appeared like vultures smelling scandal. Vans parked at the street corners. Cameras pointed at my tower. Microphones hovered near any neighbor willing to trade gossip for attention. None of them knew the truth, but lies sold better anyway. The news speculated about foreign espionage. Local rumor mills spun fantasies about mind control experiments. Karen's Facebook group celebrated her as a martyr bravely silenced by the government. She had overnight become a conspiracy icon. Meanwhile, I hid inside, sifting through every piece of my equipment once more. That's when I noticed something new, a tiny disturbance under the gravel near my tower base. I brushed the rocks aside and found faint tool marks on the soil. Someone had opened the ground panel recently. I pried it up. Inside, coiled neatly next to the grounding rod, lay another black cable not part of my original design. It slithered downward into a tunnel dug through compact dirt like a secret artery leading away from my house. My breath caught. Whoever planted the transmitter didn't just access the tower. They had built infrastructure beneath it. I called Reed immediately. His tone sharpened. "Don't touch anything else. We're sending a team." An hour later, agents returned with scanning tools. They fed a probe into the narrow tunnel. The display showed it extended underneath the fence line, directly toward Karen's property. Reed exhaled, a slow, bitter confirmation. She wasn't acting alone. Someone used her property to access yours. Someone who counted on you being blamed first. The discovery validated the nightmare. I wasn't simply collateral damage. I was the camouflage. Night fell. Agents continued scanning along the tunnel route while others searched Karen's basement addition. I stayed inside, lights off, watching through blinds. Again. That had become my new normal. Vigilance mixed with dread. Then, something strange happened. Across the street, a house I barely noticed before lit up brightly, windows glowing like a stage. A figure stepped out. Mark. The friendly conspiracy-loving neighbor. He stood at the curb observing the FBI like a patron admiring artwork. My heart jolted. Mark wasn't surprised or nervous. He was curious, proud even. He watched the chaos with an expression that looked less like concern and more like satisfaction. He turned his head slowly and our eyes met. His expression didn't change. He smiled. Not the goofy grin he wore when talking about disaster movies. A tight, knowing smile. Suddenly, the encrypted signal returned. Stronger than ever. But this time, my monitoring device identified the origin before the FBI jammer shut it down. It wasn't Karen. It wasn't me. It was Mark. He turned away from the window, closed his blinds one slat at a time, and disappeared into the dark while my pulse thundered loud enough to drown out thought. Karen wasn't my enemy. She had been my shield. And the real threat lived just across the street, smiling at the chaos he created. The moment Mark closed his blinds, I realized just how deeply I had underestimated the quietest man on the block. He was the type who rarely spoke unless there was gossip to exchange or a conspiracy theory to debate. He loved to play the fool, but the look he gave me earlier held no foolishness. It was the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. The FBI cars, the agents swarming Karen's house, the chaos tearing the neighborhood apart, none of it rattled him. If anything, he looked entertained. And that terrified me more than anything Karen had ever done. My first instinct was to grab the phone and call Reed back immediately. But something in my head screamed caution. If Mark really had been planting devices all over the block, he could easily be monitoring communications, ready to wipe evidence or disappear the moment he sensed danger. The transmitter hidden under my tower hadn't been amateur work. The digital signal was military-grade encryption. That wasn't the skill set of someone who just watched UFO documentaries. Mark's quiet, unassuming life was carefully constructed camouflage. I forced myself to breathe, to think logically. Reed's team was already here. If I made the right move, they could act fast enough to prevent Mark from slipping away. But the wrong move would alert him. And someone who understood espionage equipment would also understand escape. Before I could act, headlights flared from Mark's driveway. A dark SUV, no license plates. The kind people in spy movies use when they want to vanish into thin air. The driver's door opened and Mark stepped out wearing a black backpack slung over one shoulder. His posture had changed. Gone was the slouching posture of a bored suburbanite. His movements were sharp and rehearsed. He scanned the area, checking blind spots exactly like someone trained to evade surveillance. I pressed closer to the window, careful not to cast a silhouette. He looked straight toward my house again. It wasn't a glance. It was a calculation. He knew exactly where I was standing. He lifted a hand, not to wave but to mimic holding a radio. Then he tapped his ear twice. A silent message, "I see you. I hear you." And then, he smiled one more time, climbed into the back of the SUV, and the vehicle rolled away slowly, creeping past FBI patrols that didn't even stop them. My heart threatened to burst. I ran to the door and sprinted toward the nearest agent. He raised a hand to stop me, but I barked out the words like a plea and an alarm mixed into one breath. "He's leaving, Mark. Across the street. He's the one sending the signals." He planted the device on my tower. The agent's expression shifted from irritation to alertness. He touched his earpiece and repeated what I said. Suddenly, the calm professionalism around me turned into a controlled scramble. By the time the agents reached the end of the street, the SUV had vanished. I expected shouting. I expected sirens. Instead, Reed approached me quietly, his jaw clenched like steel. "Tell me everything you know about Mark." I told him everything. The gossip, the basement radio rumor, how Mark knew more about the FBI visit than a casual neighbor should, and especially that encrypted signal spike when he appeared at the window. Reed listened without interrupting. The more I spoke, the deeper the severity etched into his face. "We have been tracking a similar communication pattern originating from 3 different cities," he finally said. "Each time, law enforcement closed in on someone who seemed suspicious. And each time, the true operator disappeared without a trace, leaving behind someone else who took the fall. Someone who looked guilty enough to distract everyone. Someone like Karen." It all made sense. Karen was the loud distraction. The chaos generator. The perfect shield to hide the real spy in the quiet house next door. Reed continued. "We suspected the operation had a local handler. Someone trained. Someone embedded. Someone patient. He paused before finishing. We just didn't know that handler lived on your street. Agents combed every inch of Mark's property. The basement held no obvious setup. His computers were wiped clean. His closets were full of normal suburban junk. If I hadn't seen his transformation earlier, I would have believed he was just another boring neighbor. The only notable item found was a small lockbox hidden in an air vent. Inside was a cheap burner phone and a USB stick encrypted so thoroughly that even Reed's tech team couldn't crack it on the spot. It would require federal labs. Meanwhile, Karen's situation deteriorated. The more she insisted she was fighting a secret enemy, the more unstable she sounded. Her accusations against Mark were dismissed as paranoid ramblings, because she had spent weeks publicly attacking me instead. Her credibility had evaporated. She had screamed wolf too many times, and now the real wolf had slipped through the shadows unchallenged. That night, my tower felt like a cursed monument. Every time I looked at it, I imagined Mark crawling through the dirt beneath it, wiring secret devices while I slept a few feet above. I sat awake at my desk, staring at the silent radio receiver, waiting for any new pulse of encrypted data. Hours passed. Nothing. The stillness became suffocating. I needed air. I stepped outside, leaning on the porch railing, letting the cool breeze calm my nerve. A figure emerged from the darkness. Janet, another neighbor, arms crossed tight around herself. She approached cautiously like someone walking on a frozen lake. I heard the screaming earlier, she whispered. And the sirens. What's happening to our street? I wanted to lie. Say everything was fine. That the nightmare was ending. But I couldn't betray the truth anymore. Someone dangerous lived here. Someone who had used us all as chess pieces. So I told her a softened version. A spy, hidden among us, manipulating Karen to draw attention away. Her face paled. Mark? She mouthed, silent terror blooming in her eyes. Yes. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Then she looked up, dread twisting her features. That SUV. It dropped something off on my porch earlier. A package. No label. No note. My throat constricted. Where is it now? She pointed toward her home. A simple brown box sat beside her welcome mat. The air seemed to vibrate. Reed's orders echoed in my head. Whoever did this is skilled. They needed physical access, time, and knowledge of how to hide in plain sight. Mark had left. But he wasn't done. We approached the porch slowly, like bomb technicians. The box was taped shut, perfectly neat. No return address. No markings. Janet trembled beside me. I wanted to leave it alone and call the bomb squad, but instinct tugged me closer. I crouched and listened. Nothing but my own heartbeat. Then I saw the writing. Tiny, burned into the cardboard flap with a soldering iron. A message just for me. We're not done. This was only the beginning and I knew it deep inside. Waiting. I wanted to believe the message on the box was a parting taunt from someone already long gone. But I knew better. Mark wasn't the type to gloat and disappear. He was the type to keep playing the game long after everyone else thought it was over. And by dropping that package on Janet's porch, he'd hooked another piece on the board. That meant he wasn't finished with us. He was choosing his next move. I stepped back, hands raised. Don't touch it. Janet nodded vigorously, tears welling in her eyes. I dialed Agent Reed with shaky fingers and relayed everything. Within minutes, his team swarmed our street again. They treated the package like a live grenade. Robots scanned. Dogs sniffed. Techs hovered. Finally, one agent sliced into the box with a precision cutter, pulling the flaps open. Inside wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even illegal. It was worse. A handheld radio transceiver sat nestled in foam. A note taped to it read, "Try again." Reed held up the device like it was evidence from a crime scene. He gave me a look that mixed frustration and grudging admiration for our unseen opponent. "This is an encrypted communicator," he said. "Same architecture as the signals your tower detected." Meaning Mark wanted us to find it. He wanted the FBI to know he could operate anywhere he pleased. That single device shifted everything. Mark wasn't fleeing. He was escalating. Reed instructed his team to sweep the entire block, every house, every shed, every crawlspace. Neighbors panicked as agents searched for hidden transmitters. The press returned, hungry for a fresh headline. Karen's Facebook group started claiming victory, calling Mark the real tower villain, like it justified all their earlier paranoia. Karen herself remained detained, undergoing psychological evaluation. The tragic irony was that she had been right about the danger, just wrong about the source. Her worst enemy had always been the one encouraging her madness from behind the curtain. Night fell again, drenched in the glare of searchlights. Agents worked tirelessly but found nothing else. Mark had vanished with surgical precision, leaving only the footprint he wanted them to find. Not a single fingerprint on the radio. Not a fiber out of place in his house. Every channel he used had gone silent. It was like chasing a ghost. My tower stood like a monument to chaos, surrounded by caution tape and federal equipment. I sat outside, unable to sleep, watching Reed's team pack up for the night. Reed approached me with a grim expression. "You should come stay at a hotel. If he returns, you'd be the first target." I shook my head. Whatever Mark planned, I needed to see it through. "I won't run from my own home," I said. He studied me for a long second before nodding. "We'll leave surveillance in place. If anything happens, we'll know." But I didn't feel comforted. Surveillance hadn't stopped Mark yet. When the street finally quieted, I poured a cup of cold coffee and stared at the tower. I replayed every interaction with Mark. Every small detail I'd overlooked. His too accurate comments. His eagerness for information. His way of letting others draw conclusions while he remained unseen. I remembered something. The first week after the tower installation, Mark had casually asked if he could take a look at the base, saying he was curious how it was grounded. I'd been distracted, proud of the build, and let him examine the structure while I chatted with the contractors. He'd thanked me politely and walked away. That must have been when he installed the first device. I cursed myself for being naive. My thoughts were interrupted by a noise behind me. A faint click, like someone gently stepping on gravel. I spun around. Nothing but shadows. My heart jackhammered against my ribs. I grabbed a flashlight and swept it over the yard. No movement. No figures. But I couldn't shake the prickling on my neck. I wasn't alone. I moved to the tower, scanning the base again. In the beam of my flashlight, I noticed something glinting under the metal brace. A new wire. Fresh dirt. My throat tightened. I knelt down and brushed away pebbles. The wire ran deeper than the earlier one. Thicker. Purposeful. Without warning, the tower lights flickered on. They hadn't been powered since the FBI disconnected the system. I stumbled backward, bewildered. The receiver whined to life. Static crackled. Then a voice emerged through the speaker, distorted, synthesized. "You should have ignored it." The flashlight slipped from my hand. "You should have let Karen take the blame." My lungs froze. "Now you're the one left holding the tower." I forced out a shaky whisper. "Mark?" But the voice didn't respond. Instead, a sharp tone pulsed through the speakers. Then another. Faster. Stronger. I recognized the pattern instantly. It was the encrypted broadcast, only this time it wasn't faint or distant. It was blasting from my system like a flare gun in the dark. The tower was transmitting again. Reed's warning thundered through my skull. "You need to stay off the radio." I lunged toward the control panel to shut it down, but the buttons were unresponsive. Locked out. Remotely controlled. I ripped the power cable free. Nothing changed. The transmission continued, pulsing like a beacon. Someone had activated a hidden backup power supply. A spotlight hit me in the face. Agents sprinted up the driveway. Reed's voice cut through the chaos. "Hands up. Step away from the device." I raised my hands, yelling over the deafening static. "It's not me. He's inside the system." But the tower continued screaming into the night. Agents surrounded me, weapons drawn. The street filled with neighbors again, many holding phones and whispering like I'd just sprouted horns. I saw Janet clutching her children. I saw people pointing at the tower. I saw fear blooming like wildfire. Mark's voice returned, quieter now, as if savoring the moment. "Thank you for the signal boost." Then silence. Reed grabbed my arm. "We're taking you in." His eyes weren't angry. They were full of disappointment and dread. He believed I might be innocent, but the evidence was building against me like a brick wall. As they led me to the SUV, I stared at the tower, my harmless hobby, my pride, now twisted into a weapon I couldn't control. Karen had screamed to anyone who would listen that the tower was dangerous. She was wrong about why, but she had been right to be afraid. Inside the vehicle, Reed closed the door gently beside me. He spoke quietly. "If this is what I think it is, the transmitter isn't the real operation. It's a distraction. Something bigger is coming. Bigger." The word echoed inside me like a drum. Outside, the tower lights glowed blood-red for a moment, then went dark. Mark had made his move. Everyone blamed the wrong villain. And the real one was still out there, listening, waiting, and using my tower as the opening move in a game I never agreed to play.